The alien fleet arrived in Earth's orbit like a dark cloud blocking out the sun. Commander Xelnar stood in the command center of his flagship, watching as his fleet surrounded the small blue planet below. His eyes narrowed as he observed the planet, its cities bustling with life, its people unaware of the danger that was about to come. Xelnar had seen many worlds in his lifetime, and most of them were easy to conquer. His species, the Zephyrians, were known across the galaxy as fierce warriors, with weapons far more advanced than any of the species they'd encountered. For centuries, they had swept through the stars, conquering planet after planet with little resistance. Xelnar had led countless campaigns, crushing weak civilizations, and Earth would be no different, he thought. He turned to his officers, who stood at attention, waiting for his orders. His voice was calm but firm as he spoke. "Prepare to deploy the fleet. We strike now. The humans are nothing more than an obstacle, and we'll remove them quickly." His officers nodded, and the command center came alive with activity. Ships moved into position, ready to attack. Xelnar knew the humans would try to defend themselves, but he wasn't worried. They were a primitive species with little understanding of the power his fleet possessed. Xelnar had already studied their history. They had fought wars, but they were small, unorganized, and lacked the technology to match the might of the Zephyrians. This would be an easy victory. The fleet had superior weaponry, energy weapons that could slice through any defense, ships that could fly faster than light, and technology that far outmatched anything the humans could produce. Xelnar felt confident that he could wipe out their military in a matter of days. There was no need to waste time. He would strike hard and fast. Xelnar's mind raced as he thought of the glory this victory would bring him. The Zephyrians had longed for a stronghold in this part of the galaxy, and Earth would be the perfect place to establish their dominance. Once they took control, they would have access to the entire human population, an army of billions to either enslave or destroy. The possibilities were endless. "Commander," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Officer Zethra, one of his most trusted lieutenants. "We've completed our scan of Earth's defenses. Their military is weak. Their weapons are outdated, and their technology is far behind ours. There is no need to worry." Xelnar smiled, pleased by the report. "Of course. I knew it. They're nothing to us. Prepare to launch the attack. We'll hit their major cities first, and then we'll move on to their military bases. Once we break their spirit, they'll surrender without a fight." Zethra nodded and left to carry out the orders. Xelnar stood by the window of the command center, watching as the first wave of Zephyrian ships moved toward Earth. His heart beat with excitement. Soon, Earth would be his, and the humans would bow before him. He couldn't wait to see the look on their faces when they realized they were no match for the might of the Zephyrians. But even as the fleet moved closer to Earth, something in Xelnar's mind made him pause. He had read the reports, studied the humans, and felt sure of his victory. But there was a small, nagging doubt in the back of his mind, a strange feeling that something wasn't quite right. He couldn't shake the thought that there was something more to these humans than he had realized. He pushed the thought aside. It was nothing. He was a seasoned commander, and his strategy had never failed before. Earth would fall just like the other worlds before it. But deep down, he couldn't help but wonder if the humans would be as easy to defeat as he thought. As the first wave of ships entered Earth's atmosphere, Xelnar ordered the attack to begin. The fleet unleashed its energy weapons, raining destruction down on Earth's cities. Buildings exploded and fires erupted across the land. The humans had no chance. They would be crushed beneath the weight of the Zephyrian might. Xelnar's smile grew wider as he watched the chaos unfold. Victory was certain. The humans would never survive this attack. But what Xelnar didn't know was that Earth was about to show him something no other planet had ever shown the Zephyrians, something that would change everything. The first wave of attacks had been successful, but Xelnar's confidence began to waver as his fleet moved deeper into Earth's atmosphere. The alien commander had expected the humans to panic, to fall to their knees, and beg for mercy. After all, that's what most civilizations did when faced with the might of the Zephyrians. But the humans? They were different. Zelnar stood in the command center, staring at the live feeds from his fleet. Cities were burning, smoke rising into the sky. His weapons had done their job, but something strange was happening. Despite the destruction, the humans weren't surrendering. In fact, they were fighting back. And it wasn't the way any enemy Zelnar had ever fought before. Zethra, his trusted lieutenant, appeared at his side. "Commander, we've encountered unexpected resistance. The humans are using primitive weapons, but they are unpredictable. Their tactics are unlike anything we've seen." Zelnar's brow furrowed. "Primitive weapons? You're telling me these humans are fighting with nothing but outdated tools? They can't stand against our fleet. This is no different from any other world we've conquered." Zethra hesitated for a moment. "It's true, Commander, but their tactics, they don't make sense. They're not fighting like soldiers. They're using everything around them: buses, trucks, even old cars. They set up traps and ambushes. They fight in small, hidden groups. And their courage, it's like nothing we've ever seen." Zelnar felt a pang of annoyance. "That's not possible. How can they fight like this? We have the best technology in the galaxy. These humans should be terrified, running for their lives." The alien commander watched as the humans launched a surprise attack against one of his supply ships. The human forces, though small and seemingly unorganized, struck with precision. They didn't use energy weapons or advanced armor. Instead, they used simple explosives, but they hit hard. The explosion sent shockwaves through the alien ship, forcing it to pull back. Zelnar couldn't believe it. "Send more ships to their capital," Zelnar ordered, his voice growing sharp. "We'll crush them quickly. This is just a fluke." But as the fleet moved closer to Earth's heart, the strange resistance only grew stronger. The humans didn't cower or flee. They gathered in groups, hiding in the shadows, using their knowledge of their own land to their advantage. Zelnar's forces, who were trained to deal with open battles and direct confrontations, found themselves unable to predict the humans' next move. Zethra returned to report, her voice tight with frustration. "Commander, our forces are being slowed by human resistance. We've underestimated them. These humans don't just fight with weapons. They fight with their will. They don't stop, even when they're outnumbered." Zelnar's eyes narrowed. He had never encountered an enemy that didn't know how to give up. The Zephyrians had crushed countless worlds, but these humans, they didn't understand the concept of surrender. Every time his forces thought they had broken the human resistance, they rose again. The commander watched another live feed as a group of humans, led by a woman carrying nothing but a few old rifles, managed to ambush a group of Zephyrian soldiers. The human fighters were not skilled soldiers, but they knew how to use their environment. They worked together, attacking in ways the aliens could never predict. The ambush was a success, and several Zephyrian soldiers were lost in the attack. Zelnar gritted his teeth. "This is madness. These humans shouldn't be able to do this." But the truth was clear. The humans had something that the Zephyrians didn't expect. They had spirit. They had courage. And most surprising of all, they had creativity. They didn't rely on just brute strength or advanced technology. They adapted. They used whatever they could find, turning their world into a weapon against the aliens. Zethra's voice broke through his thoughts. "Commander, we've just received word from our outer patrols. There are no signs of retreat. The humans are regrouping, and they're not giving up. We've never faced an enemy like this before." Zelnar stood up from his seat, his mind racing. This was no ordinary battle. The humans had caught him off guard. He had expected them to be like any other species, weak, predictable, ready to collapse when faced with overwhelming force. But instead, they were fighting back with everything they had, refusing to fall, even in the face of certain death. The alien commander had no idea what was going on. His fleet was powerful. His weapons were deadly. And yet, the humans didn't seem to care. They didn't seem to understand that they were supposed to lose. They fight like animals, Zalnar muttered under his breath, almost to himself. But they fight like animals that can never be tamed. He wasn't sure what to do next. His confidence was slipping away. For the first time in his career, he wasn't so sure victory was a guarantee. These humans weren't like the others. They were far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. And as the battle continued, Zalnar realized that the real fight had only just begun. The battle began with a roar. Zalnar stood in the command center of his flagship, watching Earth below through the massive windows. His fleet had already destroyed several cities, but the humans hadn't surrendered. Instead, they kept fighting. They kept coming back. The alien commander had expected them to break easily, but instead, their resistance was growing stronger by the minute. It was clear now. These humans were different. "Deploy the second wave," Zalnar ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We will destroy their military bases. This ends today." His fleet moved in, ships firing their deadly energy weapons at Earth's defenses. Explosions erupted across the planet's surface. And yet, the humans didn't run. They didn't scatter. Instead, they fought back with everything they had. Zethra, the officer who had warned Zalnar before, approached with a concerned look on her face. "Commander, we've encountered more resistance. The humans are using everything they can to defend their world. Their weapons are crude, but they're still causing damage." Zalnar clenched his fists, his irritation rising. "Crude? What do you mean? We have superior weapons. We can destroy them in minutes. Why are they still fighting?" Zethra looked at the live feed on the screen, showing human soldiers using old rifles and homemade explosives. "They don't fight like we expected. They don't give up. They seem to know how to turn even the simplest things into weapons. It's almost like they're fighting with passion." Zalnar didn't understand. What kind of species could stand against his fleet for this long? His soldiers were trained for war, equipped with advanced armor and weapons that could tear through the best defenses. And yet these humans kept coming back, refusing to fall. The commander watched as another wave of human soldiers, barely more than a handful, launched an attack against one of his supply ships. They used nothing but makeshift explosives and determined courage. The bomb they set off cracked open the hull of the ship, sending alien soldiers scrambling in confusion. The attack was small, but it was enough to send a message. The humans were tough, and that toughness was starting to annoy Zalnar. "What is wrong with these people?" Zalnar muttered under his breath. "They should be begging for mercy, not fighting like wild animals." Zethra stepped forward. "Commander, it seems these humans don't know how to quit. They don't know how to be afraid. Every time we think we've beaten them, they return stronger. They fight not for survival, but because they believe in their world. And that makes them dangerous." Zalnar's anger grew. He had seen it all before, enemy forces that fought hard, but always eventually gave up. But these humans, they were different. Their will to fight seemed endless. Their fearlessness was something the Zephyrians had never encountered. This wasn't supposed to be a battle. This was supposed to be a conquest. "Send in the third wave," Zalnar commanded, trying to keep his frustration in check. "We will wipe them out once and for all." His ships moved forward, unleashing a full assault on one of Earth's largest military bases. Zalnar expected a swift victory, but once again, the humans surprised him. They didn't run. They didn't hide. Instead, they used their surroundings to their advantage, setting traps, attacking from the shadows, and fighting with more cunning than Zalnar had thought possible. He watched as a small group of human soldiers, armed with nothing but basic rifles and homemade armor, took down a squadron of elite Zephyrian soldiers. The humans didn't even have the proper training, but they fought with such heart that it seemed like they couldn't be stopped. Zalnar's ships fired on the base, but the humans managed to hold their ground for longer than he expected. Every time the aliens thought they had them cornered, The humans found a way to escape, regroup, and strike again. "They're too resilient," Zelnar said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Why aren't they giving up?" Zethra's voice was grave. "Commander, it's more than resilience. It's something deeper. These humans, they fight for more than just survival. They fight for each other. They fight for their home. They fight because they believe in something greater than themselves." Zelnar stared at the screen, his frustration building. The humans had something he didn't understand. They were fighting with an intensity that no army could match. His ships were powerful, but the humans had something that couldn't be measured by technology or strength. They had heart. The battle raged on, but the humans didn't stop. They used everything they had, old cars, broken-down tanks, anything they could find, to fight back. And each time the aliens thought they had won, the humans were there, rising again. Zelnar couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The battle wasn't going as he planned. He had thought that a quick, overwhelming force would crush the humans. But they weren't like other species. They weren't giving up. They weren't afraid. They were fighting back, harder than Zelnar had ever expected. And for the first time in his life, the commander wasn't sure if victory was within his reach. The battle raged on, and Zelnar's confidence began to crumble. His fleet had been fighting the humans for days, and yet, instead of giving in, the humans only seemed to fight harder. Zelnar had expected an easy victory, but it was becoming clear that this was no ordinary enemy. The commander watched as another wave of humans launched a surprise attack on one of his outer ships, causing more damage than he thought possible. He stood in his command center, staring at the live feeds. The Zephyrian fleet had superior technology, superior weapons, but the humans were still holding their ground. The explosions from their makeshift bombs were damaging his ships, and his soldiers were being ambushed in the most unexpected ways. Zelnar clenched his fists, trying to control the anger that was rising within him. "Why won't they surrender?" Zelnar growled, his voice tight with frustration. "They should be begging for mercy by now." Zethra, his trusted lieutenant, stepped forward. "Commander, we've underestimated them. Their resistance is stronger than we anticipated. They're using guerrilla tactics, attacking when we least expected and retreating before we can counterattack." Zelnar's jaw tightened. "I know what they're doing. They're trying to outlast us. But that's impossible. We have the firepower. We have the numbers." Zethra hesitated. "It's not just their tactics, Commander. They fight with something more, something we can't quite understand. They're not afraid. They don't know how to give up. Even when we think they've been broken, they come back with more strength." Zelnar's mind raced. What kind of species fights like this? He had conquered hundreds of worlds. He had seen civilizations rise and fall, but none had fought like this. The humans were not like the others. They didn't give up, no matter how much damage they took. They fought like they had something to prove. Zelnar's thoughts were interrupted by another explosion on one of his ships. This time, it was a much larger blast, one that sent shockwaves through the entire fleet. The humans had somehow managed to get close enough to launch a direct hit on one of his flagship's energy cores. For a moment, the commander thought the ship might actually be lost. "Damage report," Zelnar barked. The bridge officer quickly checked the systems. "We've taken heavy damage, Commander. Shields are down by 30%. We're going to need time to recover." Zelnar's mind raced. The humans were everywhere, attacking from all directions. It wasn't just the surprise ambushes anymore. They were getting smarter, more organized. They were adapting to his tactics, learning from their mistakes. "They're not just fighting for survival anymore," Zethra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're fighting because they believe they can win. They believe they can defeat us." Zelnar's eyes flickered with disbelief. "But we are the Zephyrians. We are the most advanced species in the galaxy. No one has ever resisted us for this long. These humans, they're just human?" Zethra finished for him, her voice calm. They fight for their homes, for their families, for their future. That's something we can't understand. Zelnar's mind spun as he processed her words. He had never encountered an enemy like this before. His enemies always fought because they had to, because they feared the power of the Zephyrian fleet. But these humans, these strange, unpredictable humans, were different. They fought not because they feared death, but because they had something to fight for. Zelnar tried to push the doubt from his mind. He was a commander, a leader. He couldn't afford to question his strategy now. "Continue the assault," he ordered, trying to hide the unease creeping into his voice. "We will crush them. They have no chance." But even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had ordered countless attacks, and yet every time the humans were pushed back, they returned stronger. It wasn't like any battle he had ever fought. There was no clear victory, only more destruction, more resistance. Hours passed, and the battle continued with no sign of ending. The humans seemed to be everywhere, hiding in cities, in forests, in mountains. They struck when his forces least expected it, hitting hard and retreating before his ships could retaliate. Every attempt to gain ground felt like a waste, as the humans simply regrouped and came back again. Zelnar could feel the doubt creeping into his mind. He had underestimated them. He had thought that his fleet's power would be enough to break the humans. But they weren't breaking. They were adapting. They were learning. And they were becoming more dangerous with every passing hour. He glanced at Zethra. "Do you think they can win?" he asked quietly, the words leaving his mouth before he could stop them. Zethra didn't answer right away. She simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know, Commander. But I can tell you this. If anyone can, it's these humans." The words hit Zelnar like a punch to the chest. For the first time in his career, he wasn't so sure of victory. The humans were tougher than expected. And that was a problem he hadn't planned for. Zelnar stood before the vast windows of his flagship, staring down at the war-torn earth below. His fleet had launched wave after wave of attacks, but the humans refused to surrender. Despite everything, they kept fighting. And every time they were pushed back, they came back stronger. How long can they keep this up? Zelnar muttered, his voice tight with frustration. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles turning white. His once unshakable confidence had begun to fade, replaced by a sense of unease. Zethra, his lieutenant, stood by his side. "Commander, we've never faced anything like this before. The humans are showing no signs of weakness. They've resisted us at every turn." Zelnar glanced at the screen in front of him, where another human resistance group was ambushing the Zephyrian patrol. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like they had nothing to lose. They didn't hide in fear. They fought fiercely, even when they were outnumbered. "They fight with something we don't understand," Zethra said, almost as if reading his thoughts. "It's not just their weapons or tactics. It's their will. They won't surrender, no matter how much we hurt them." Zelnar didn't want to admit it, but she was right. The humans weren't afraid of death. They didn't fear the destruction his fleet caused. They didn't know how to give up, and that made them more dangerous than anything Zelnar had ever faced. He turned his attention to the reports coming in from the battlefield. Another Zephyrian ship had been heavily damaged by human explosives. The attack had been small, yet precise, and it had cost his fleet valuable time and resources. "It's like they know exactly how to hurt us," Zelnar growled, frustration lining his voice. "We've destroyed their cities, their armies, their weapons, and yet they keep coming back." Zethra nodded. "They've lost everything, homes, families, cities, but they keep fighting. They fight for each other, for their survival, for the future they refuse to give up on." Zelnar paced back and forth, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His fleet was superior in every way. His weapons could obliterate planets, and his soldiers were trained for any conflict. So why hadn't the humans folded? Why were they still resisting? I've seen civilizations crumble before, Zelnar said, his voice low. The moment they realize they cannot win, they beg for mercy. They beg to be spared. But these humans, he shook his head. They don't beg. They don't even consider it. Zethra spoke softly, almost thoughtfully. It's because they believe they can win. They've fought wars before. They know how to lose, but they also know how to keep fighting, even when victory seems impossible. And right now, they believe they can still beat us. Zelnar stared at her, his mind racing. He had underestimated the humans. He had expected them to crumble under his superior firepower, but instead, they had adapted. They had learned from every encounter. They used their environment, their limited resources, and their unyielding spirit to keep fighting. No matter how many ships Zelnar sent to destroy them, the humans found a way to survive. The commander thought of the many reports he had received from his soldiers. In every battle, the humans didn't just fight. They resisted. They found ways to outsmart the Zephyrians, turning their own weaknesses into strengths. They were not an easy target. They were not the broken, fearful species Zelnar had assumed them to be. They are relentless, Zelnar said quietly, the words feeling heavy. And it's not just about survival. They're fighting because they have something to fight for. It's not just their lives. They're fighting for their planet. They're fighting for their people. Zethra gave him a look of understanding. Yes, Commander. And that's something we don't fully comprehend. We fight to win. We fight for power, for control. But these humans, they fight for hope. Zelnar felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had been so focused on his fleet's strength, his weapons, his numbers. He hadn't fully understood the power of belief. The humans weren't just defending their world. They were defending a future they believed in. We've tried everything, Zelnar admitted, his voice laced with frustration. We've bombarded their cities, destroyed their armies, and yet they're still here. They still refuse to give up. Zethra looked at him, her face grim. Maybe it's time we consider that we can't break them. Maybe it's time we face the truth. These humans are stronger than we ever realized. Zelnar clenched his fists, his anger rising. He wasn't ready to admit defeat, not yet. He had never backed down before, and he wasn't about to start now. But the doubts were growing harder to ignore. We will not surrender, Zelnar muttered to himself. I will not let this be our defeat. Zethra didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She knew what was going through the commander's mind. The humans had shown him their strength, and Zelnar knew that the real battle had only just begun. But as he stared out at the chaos unfolding below, he couldn't shake the feeling that the humans weren't the ones who would surrender. It would be him. Zelnar sat in the command center, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The battle below had dragged on longer than he had ever anticipated. His fleet, once so confident in their strength, was starting to show signs of wear. His soldiers were tired, his ships damaged, and the humans were still fighting. It had been weeks since the invasion began, and yet, no matter how many cities he destroyed, no matter how many soldiers he sent, they kept coming back. Stronger, more determined, unyielding. Zethra stood nearby, studying the reports. Commander, the humans are beginning to regroup. They've established new defense lines in the mountains and forests. Every time we push them back, they just come up with something new. Zelnar's fists clenched at his sides. Why? Why do they keep fighting? They have no hope. They've lost everything. Yet they still resist. Zethra didn't answer immediately. She understood what the commander was feeling. They had faced enemies before, even ones who fought back with strength, but none had ever fought like this. The humans were relentless. Even when his ships sent down waves of energy blasts to obliterate their homes, the humans rose from the ashes and fought again. They don't see it the way we do, Zethra said quietly. To them, this isn't about power. It's about survival. about their future. Zelnar turned sharply toward her, his eyes flashing with frustration. Survival. They're fighting a losing battle. I've seen this before. The moment they realize they cannot win, they'll break. They'll beg for mercy. Zethra looked at him with a calm expression. I don't think these humans know how to break, Commander. They don't know how to beg. They've been through so much already. They fight for their families, their homes. They fight because they believe in something. Something you can't destroy with weapons. Zelnar's mind raced. What Zethra said made sense. The humans didn't fear destruction. They didn't fear death. They fought for each other, for their world, with a kind of spirit Xalnar hadn't seen before. They didn't give up, even when they had every reason to. And that was something he couldn't comprehend. The humans didn't just want to survive. They wanted to live. He turned to the tactical screen, his eyes scanning the movements of his ships and the humans below. They had trapped his forces in a narrow valley. The humans used their knowledge of the land to outsmart them at every turn. They had set up ambushes, creating explosions and traps that sent shockwaves through his soldiers. This isn't supposed to be happening. Zelnar muttered under his breath. We should be winning by now. Zethra's voice was soft, almost sympathetic. You're seeing them wrong, Commander. It's not about winning for them. It's about refusing to lose. Zelnar stared at her, feeling a strange weight settle on his chest. The idea was foreign to him. In every battle, he had fought to win. He had always believed that victory was the only way to secure a future. But these humans, these stubborn, unpredictable humans, fought with a different kind of purpose. They fought not to crush their enemies, but to protect what was theirs. And that was something far more powerful than anything he had ever faced. How can they be so strong? Zelnar whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Zethra didn't answer at first. She simply looked at the human soldiers on the battlefield, their faces full of determination, their eyes burning with a fire Xalnar had never seen before. Finally, she spoke. They have something inside them, she said, a will to fight that goes beyond reason. They don't just resist because they want to live. They resist because they believe in their world. They believe in each other, and they will fight for that, no matter the cost. Zelnar was silent for a long time, his eyes never leaving the screen. He had seen countless battles, countless enemies bow to his fleet, but he had never seen anything like this. The human spirit was unlike anything he could comprehend. It wasn't something his advanced weapons or his fleets could destroy. It wasn't something that could be wiped out by energy blasts or orbital bombardments. It was something that burned in their hearts, something that no one could take away from them. They don't know when to quit, Zethra added, and that's what makes them dangerous. Zelnar looked down at his hands, feeling a strange emptiness. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he could win. His ships were powerful, but the humans were fighting with something far stronger. They weren't just fighting for their planet. They were fighting for each other. And that bond, that unbreakable connection, was something Zelnar couldn't destroy. Maybe we were wrong, Zelnar said, his voice almost a whisper. Maybe they're not the ones who need to surrender. Maybe it's us. Zethra said nothing, but she didn't need to. She knew what he was thinking. The humans had shown them a strength that no weapon, no fleet, no amount of force could ever defeat. The human spirit, unstoppable, unwavering, was something Zelnar had never expected. And it was something that now made him question whether his victory was truly inevitable. Zelnar stood alone on the bridge of his flagship, staring out at the earth below. The battle had dragged on for weeks, and yet the humans had not given up. They continued to fight with a spirit that refused to be broken, even as their cities lay in ruins, their soldiers outnumbered, and their planet ravaged by his fleet. His once confident resolve had begun to shatter. The humans, despite all odds, had shown him a strength he had never anticipated. He had always believed that victory was a matter of power, of force. But the humans had taught him something he could not ignore. Their will to fight was stronger than any weapon he commanded. They fought not because they feared death, but because they had something worth protecting. Zelnar turned to Zethra, his loyal lieutenant, who had been at his side through it all. "I don't understand them, Zethra," he said quietly. "Why do they keep going? Why don't they surrender? They've lost so much, and yet they keep coming." Zethra didn't answer right away. She too had been watching the humans, trying to understand what made them so different from every other species they had conquered. They fight because they have something to live for. They fight because they believe they can win. They fight for each other, for their homes, for their future. Zelnar's mind raced. Everything he had learned as a commander told him that when an enemy reached a certain point, they would crumble. They would surrender, beg for mercy, and allow him to finish the war. But the humans were not crumbling. They were not begging. They were fighting, even though they had no reason to believe they could win. "They don't know when to quit," Zethra added softly. "And that's what makes them dangerous." Zelnar looked out at the swirling chaos of the battle below. His ships hovered above the planet, firing down energy beams, bombing cities, destroying whatever they could. But no matter how much they destroyed, the humans just kept coming. Their resistance had only grown stronger, more organized. It was as though every attack made them more determined to fight. The commander had always been sure of his power. He had led countless campaigns, crushed enemies with ease. But the humans, they were different. They didn't fight to win. They fought because they refused to lose. They fought because they believed in something beyond themselves. Zelnar's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden flash on the view screen. A human fighter ship had broken through his fleet's defenses and managed to strike one of his outer ships with a small but deadly explosive. The explosion rocked his flagship, and a wave of anger surged through him. But as the image of the small, defiant human ship flashed on the screen, Zelnar felt a strange sensation inside him. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Respect. The human pilot had risked everything, knowing that the odds were against them, yet they still made the attempt. Zelnar had seen many armies fight with desperation, but the humans fought with purpose. He couldn't deny it anymore. They were not like the others. They were not the broken, weak species he had assumed them to be. He turned to Zethra. "What do we do, Zethra? Every strategy I've tried, every attack we've launched, it's not enough. The humans are not breaking. If we continue this, they will only suffer more." And yet, Zethra's eyes met his, steady and calm. "You already know the answer, Commander. The question is, will you accept it?" Zelnar's mind flashed to the countless battles he had fought, the civilizations he had crushed. He had never doubted his victory before. But the humans were different. They had something he had never understood, something that could not be destroyed with his weapons. He thought of the faces of the human soldiers he had seen on the battlefield. Determined, unwavering. They were fighting for their homes, for their people, for their future. They weren't fighting for glory or power. They were fighting because it was the only thing left to do. Zelnar knew what he had to do. The decision weighed heavily on him. His pride, his duty as a commander, had always told him that the enemy must be crushed, that there was no room for mercy. But the humans had shown him the power of hope, the power of belief. He could not continue to destroy them. He could not continue to watch them suffer when they were fighting for something so pure. He turned to Zethra. "We end it," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "We stopped the fighting." Zethra raised an eyebrow, her surprise clear. "Are you sure, Commander?" Zelnar's gaze hardened. "Yes, I've made my decision. I will not be the one to destroy their spirit. I will not be the one to wipe out their future." He activated the comms, sending a message to his fleet. "Cease fire. All ships, stand down. Prepare for a retreat." There was silence on the bridge for a moment. Then a chorus of voices confirmed his orders. The fleet would pull back. The battle would end. As Zelnar stood there, looking out at the earth below, He felt a strange sense of relief. He had made the right choice. He had chosen not to destroy the humans, but to leave them to their future. And as the fleet began its withdrawal, Salnar realized that he had learned something in this war, something that no amount of force could ever teach him. The true strength of an enemy isn't in their weapons or numbers. It's in their will to fight, their will to survive, and their belief in a future worth fighting for. And the humans, they had all of that.